Mrs. Robinson, if you just explain a little bit about why gender is an important climate change issue. It may not be obvious to those outside the debate.
I must say it's really very clear to me. I come to the climate change debate from a human rights perspective. And what happened was I kept seeing in African countries the way in which the livelihoods of farmers, many of them women, poor communities, slum dwellers, were being undermined by weather shocks. And it has a very different impact on women and men. If there's a drought, women have to go further for firewood, etc. If it's flooding, the women have to cope with the fact that their homes, the school, are destroyed. I constantly refer to my friend Constance O'Kellett from Uganda. When she was growing up in her village, they had normal seasons. They were poor, but they had enough food. Now they have long periods of drought, and I met her here in the African Pavilion, and she told me that her hectares of groundnuts have been destroyed by flash flooding. And what's she going to do next year to feed her family? So there's a huge gender dimension, and especially because women are both victims and also agents for change.
Is it an issue that is being adequately addressed? I saw at Cancun there were 6 agreements on gender issues. It's going to be a focus at Rio Plus 20, but is that enough?
Well, I was very much involved in Cancun and pleased that there was some progress, but I recognised that what is needed is a platform of women leaders. And we started in Cancun and since then have created a Troika Plus, which is led by the 2 chairs, Patricia Espinosa of Mexico and Maite Mashaban of South Africa, as the chairs of COP16 and 17, and also Christiana Figueres is very supportive, Connie Hedegaard, Gro Brundtland, a whole lot of leaders, and we will be co-hosting with South Africa on Wednesday a meeting of ministers, mainly women ministers, but also some supportive men. Why are we doing this? Because we found that although there were a lot of individual women ministers, they were constrained to raise the gender issue. Partly because it was a bit obvious, I'm the woman. So on the whole they didn't. And there was a tendency to think that climate is gender neutral. It's not. There is a huge negative impact, particularly on women, and there's a huge need for more emphasis on adaptation to help women in their communities to cope. But also, moving on to Rio, as you said, technology tends to be a male-dominated area. So it's not even gender neutral at all. It's actually gender biased towards men. And we need to make sure in Rio that we have a very proactive gender dimension.
And if agreement, obviously there's progress being made in the negotiating halls. If assuming that agreements can be reached, what is the difficulties? What are the challenges in applying agreements made in conference centres like this on the ground, especially in countries where gender equity perhaps is an issue, where we don't have the gender equity? There's obviously a massive diversity in gender equity around the world. What are the challenges you face in applying, especially in consultation over environmental projects, and then in actually applying those projects?
Well, I think first of all, we're working in a very close way with the Global Gender Climate Alliance. We are present every day at the Women's Caucus in the morning, and we're all tracking the areas in COP17 where we can strengthen the gender dimensions, whether it's on mitigation, adaptation, financing, the Green Climate Fund, transfer of technologies. And we hope to have a list for the women ministers and the support of men on the 7th. Here is what you can do to strengthen the text. But we also believe that food security is a huge issue for this continent, and after all, this is where the conference is taking place. And there is a strong move to have a work programme on agriculture. So substantively, we think a work programme on agriculture linked to food security would also do a great deal to support the negative impacts of climate on poor communities.
Your own foundation has a vision for 2020 on gender equity. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, it's to reinforce this platform, this critical mass, the Troika Plus of women leaders, and link it with women at grassroots. We're going to have an opportunity leading up to Rio Plus 20 to be focusing on energy, but we do need progress on the legal form issue, that difficult Kyoto and the LCA track. So we're aware that it won't be adequate to have very strong language on gender if we don't have an acceptance of the need for progress, and I mean really meeting the commitments. I find it very frustrating when I'm talking to ordinary people about climate, particularly in this country and other African countries. There is a sense of urgency. Here, far too much in the discussions. You get the sense it's like a trade negotiation. People keep their cards to their chest. They're not going to. We need flexibility to get a practical convergence between the continuation of Kyoto and a strong commitment. And we cannot wait to 2020. That's 9 years away. The International Energy Agency has told us the next 5 years are critical. What are future generations going to say? And that's another reason for bringing women leaders together. We actually instinctively are more intergenerational. You know, I quite naturally speak and think about my 4 small grandchildren who will be in their 40s in 2050. The population will be over 9 billion. What kind of world for the children of 2050? And for the sort of the need to be actively taking decisions now, especially those parts of the world that have benefited from fossil fuel growth. We need more sense of responsibility, and that's why we're focusing on climate justice.